write. Finish what you write. That's two. But those are the first two of Robert A. Heinlein's famous four rules of writing, which had a lot of effect on me personally, particularly the second one. I mean, a lot of people talk about writing. I'm going to write a book someday. I've always wanted to be a writer. They never actually write anything. Obviously, you have to write to be a writer, not just talk about writing. But the one, particularly when I was a kid and a teenager, I was writing a lot of stories, but I was never finishing any of the stories. I'd have this beautiful vision in my head of the masterpiece that I was going to create, and then I'd start to write it, and I'd get it halfway through, and gosh, it wasn't a masterpiece. It was all flawed. It wasn't as brilliant as I thought. It was all kind of messed up. And I'd get, the more I wrote, the less and less in love with it I'd be. And then I'd have another idea for a different masterpiece that I could write. So I'd put aside that one and finish and start a new one. And of course, that way I wound up with a drawer full of fragments and never any actual stories with a beginning, middle, and end, until I encountered Robert A. Heinlein and his rules of writing. And the second one was, you must finish what you write. So I'm still trying to do that now with my own books, with Song of Ice and Fire, of course. I started writing it, and now I'm fighting to finish what I wrote. I think when I finish A Song of Ice and Fire, this giant 7-volume mega series, that will be my favorite book. That will be my magnum opus. But I'm not finished it yet, so I don't want to kind of jinx it by naming that one as my favorite. I have to stick the ending. So of the books that I've actually published and are complete, maybe Fever Dream, my historical vampire novel set in 1857, antebellum Mississippi River. That one has a beginning, middle, and end. It came out, it was probably until I began Game of Thrones, it was my most popular and successful novel, and it's one that I always had a particular warm spot for. Well, I write at my computer, my home computer in my home office. I don't travel well. I mean, I've tried in the past. I've had various laptops at various points in my life, and I would lug them around the world on airplanes and on trains and to hotel rooms in Amsterdam and Switzerland and New Zealand, and I've never been very successful with that kind of writing. I keep thinking, why am I doing this? I'm in Amsterdam. I should be out seeing the city. I'm in New Zealand. I should be on a beach or seeing a volcano or something. The only time I can really make the world go away, I have found, is when I'm in my own place, surrounded by my own things. I got my computer on, and I can make the world go away. I think I was, part of me was already writing stories before I really even got into books, when I was just reading comic books and things like that. But certainly Lord of the Rings was one of the books that had an enormous influence on me. I encountered that around when I was in junior high school. And in some ways it discouraged me because I loved it so much. I thought, my God, this is harder than, how can I ever hope to equal this? Maybe I should just give it up. But ultimately it challenged me, and it's a book that I keep returning to. Every few years I have to pick it up to read it again in part or in whole. It was not just a book, it created an entire world. I mean, I have never been to Middle Earth. No one has, except in our imaginations, but I feel like I know the place. I know the place better than many real places where I've also never been, like parts of Asia or South America or the Antarctic. I haven't been to those places, but they exist in my mind. And Middle Earth exists in my mind in much the same way. It has a level of reality that has made it part of my life and my life experiences. And that's what I want to do with my own books. Make Westeros a similar kind of world. When I was very young and reading these stories, I wanted to be the things in the stories. So I was a science fiction fan, so I wanted to be a spaceman. We didn't even have the word astronaut then. That was coined in 1957 by the Mercury program. When they launched the Mercury program, they came up with the word astronaut. Before that, they were spacemen. Captain Video, Tom Corbett of the Space Cadets, Rocky Jones of the Space Patrol, blasting their way through the spaceways. That's what I wanted to be. But at a certain point, I realized my chances of being a spaceman were, small. Um, so I said, well, maybe I can make up stories about the spaceman instead. And I did seem to have a gift for it, so that's the direction my life took me. Badly. I'm not much of a planner. I have a lecture that I give sometimes to writing courses where I talk about that there are basically two kinds of writers in the world, which I call the architects and the gardeners. The architects plan their books ahead of time, like an architect designing a house. He knows how many rooms the house is going to have. He knows the square footage of each room. Is it going to be forced air heating or radiant heat? How many bathrooms? What the plumbing is going to be like? He knows everything about that house, and he hasn't even bought the land yet. He hasn't driven a board, but the whole thing is laid out there. And there are writers who approach their books like that. And then there are the gardeners who, they dig a hole, they throw in a seed, they water it, in the case of writers with blood, and they see what comes up. Now they know there's a certain amount of planning even involved in gardening. I mean, whether you planted a petunia or an oak tree. But as it grows, it surprises you, and sometimes it dies and doesn't grow properly, and sometimes it grows crooked or it grows in a direction that you didn't anticipate, but you react to it. Now, I don't think there's anyone who's 100% architect or 100% gardener, but some writers lean very strongly one way, some lean the other, and I'm very much a gardener, as was my idol, Tolkien. He began Lord of the Rings, supposed to be a sequel to The Hobbit, another little short adventure for children, and look at the epic that resulted. So the tale grows in the telling, Tolkien said, and my tales tend to do that too. And there's both good and bad in that. Sometimes they die in the telling. Sometimes your characters lead you off on a merry chase in the wrong direction, and you realize that, oh my God, I've wasted a whole month, and this whole storyline is not working. Let's go back. That never happens to the architects. On the other hand, I think the gardeners produce books that have more actual life in them.
Magic.
A tree is alive in a way a house is not. um, I don't have a lesson that I'm trying to teach or anything. I agree with whoever it was that says if you have a message, use Western Union.
Sam Goldwyn.
But certainly I'm saying things in my work, and I hope it resonates with some people and comes through. Um, I hope the people, when they're finished with my work and 5 years passed and 10 years passed, that they remember my work not as if they read it, but as if they had lived it, because I think that's the best. The best and most powerful kind of work becomes part of our memories, becomes part of our lives. I still remember the mines of Moria and journeying with Sam and Frodo across the Shelob's cave and all of the adventures that they have. I remember those things as if I was along with them, as if those are things that happened to me. I don't remember the name of 75% of the high school class that I was in at the time I was reading them. I've forgotten the real people in my life. I've forgotten many of the real events, but those things. So, which did I actually live? The part that I remember, or the part that, yeah, physically I was there, but it's like gone. So, I hope that my work becomes part of the minds of many people, and they remember Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen and Tyrion Lannister, and Abner Marsh and Sandy Blair and Evelyn Tuff and all my other characters.